development of a new and very special skill, rock throwing. In order to see, the harder you hit them, the sooner they'll get injured, they'll stumble and so forth. That'll make it go faster. And this may be a strong animal. It may take all day to chase it down. So throwing rocks is very important. And the main things are, you need to throw a big rock very fast, and you need to throw it very accurately. And so hominids developed, actually hominid males, developed very good skills at rock throwing. You can see there are two things required to do this. First, you need large pectoral muscles. These are the primary source of power in rock throwing. Biceps are a secondary source. So you want large pectorals, large biceps. That's what makes you a good rock thrower. And by the way, I'm sure you've heard these things about, well, human beings are such wimps, we're weaklings. We can't smell very well, we can't see very well, we can't hear. We don't have any claws, and we don't have big teeth, don't have armor, we can't run very fast. We're total weaklings, except we're smart. That's the only advantage we have, right? Wrong. We do have one thing we can do better than anybody else, and that is throw rocks. No one can throw rocks like we can. And there's a way to prove it. This weekend, go down to the zoo and go to the chimpanzee. And chimpanzees also throw, but they're no good at all. And so what you do is you go to the chimpanzee thing and then go, ah! at them. And they'll get mad, and they'll start flinging feces at you. But they're such lousy throwers. And what you do then is pick up a feces and you nail them, thereby proving your superiority. So you need big pectoral muscles and big biceps, but you also need one other thing, practice. Lots of practice. And that's why little boys are always throwing rocks. Little boys love to throw rocks. But the thing is, they never outgrow it. When they get older, they just stop throwing rocks. Instead, they throw baseballs, basketballs, bocce balls, boomerangs, cavers, footballs, American footballs, frisbees, fruit cakes, hammers, knives, snowballs, shot puts, spears, tomahawks, volleyballs, water polo balls. And if they can't throw it, they kick it. And if they can't kick it, they hit it with a stick. Humans love throwing things. And over the centuries, they have developed better and better ways of throwing things, like the Phylogeny, a spear thrower. And then later on, they figured out a really great way to throw rocks, the sling. And then they got better with the bow and arrow. And then they started building big machines to throw really big rocks. And then came cannons that throw really big rocks. And they built bigger and bigger cannons. And now they build great big cannons for fun. These things can shoot a pumpkin more than a kilometer. And when they can't actually throw the real thing, they play at throwing things. I mean, think about it. What is the most powerful, most accurate way to throw a rock really, really fast? A gun. And that's why they love guns. So, to the women in the audience, I will say, if you want to understand men, this is all you need to understand. This is secondary. I will also point out that this defines many of our concepts of masculinity. You will note that these highly masculine people all possess very large pectoral muscles and very large biceps, because that's what we consider to be, these guys can really throw rocks. Another way to demonstrate, though, your prowess as a so little boys like to say, "I'm a man." So this stuff still has profound effects on human behavior. And I'd like to point out that with this, the balance between locomotor learning and cerebral learning has changed again in favor of cerebral learning. Throwing a rock accurately requires a certain amount of thinking. You have to estimate the weight of the rock, its shape, how it will fly through the air, the range you're going for. There's a certain amount of thinking involved in that. So let's move to the fourth major milestone in the phylogeny of play. And that came with the interaction. See, hominids had started by using their hands to throw things. And the hand became psychologically more important. And so they started holding things in their hands, looking at them, and thinking about them. So initially this was merely to make stone tools. But once they started using their hands, they realized they could do other things with their hands. They just had to think more about it. They could build strange things. They could make fire. They could make clothing. And it all involved the hand, the eye, and the brain working together. And so in the fourth milestone, we see that the balance has shifted very strongly in favor of the cerebral element as opposed to the locomotor element. So let's summarize what these four stages mean. Over the course of phylogenetic time, that is, evolutionary time, the locomotor element in our learning has steadily decreased, and the cerebral element has steadily increased. Now I'd like to introduce you to this man here, Dr. Ernst Haeckel. I mispronounced his name. German biologist about 130 years or so ago, and he came up with an idea which I consider to be one of the greatest ideas in scientific history. It is called, or it is a Haeckel's law, and the law consists of just three words. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Now, this would be really great if you knew what the words mean. So, phylogeny you already know. That's the evolutionary track of an animal's history. Ontogeny is the developmental path that you take from conception to adulthood. In other words, we start off as a fertilized egg, a single-celled creature, which is how life began. And then as we develop, we grow into bigger and bigger things. Did you know at one point the human fetus has gills like a fish that later disappear? And then at another point, the human fetus has a tail, which later disappears. And so the idea is, over the course of time, that fetus is tracing the development of human evolution. The problem is Haeckel's law is wrong. That is, at this point you don't look like a caveman, and you don't look like a dinosaur or something at another point, or a rat. There are millions of exceptions to Haeckel's law, but it is good enough as an idea that it still retains some intellectual utility. It's still an interesting idea to keep in mind when you think about evolution and how children grow up and so forth. Indeed, you can see it in the behavioral ontogeny of the human baby. That is, we start off crawling flat on the ground, just like Tiktaalik did. And then over the course of time, we learn to move our forelimbs directly underneath our body until we reach the point where we can crawl like that. Then we start learning bipedal motion. And once we get properly bipedal, we learn new gaits. Not just walking, but also running,